a spirit of infirmity. Luke chapter 13 verses 10 to 13. Now he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, and behold, there was a woman who had a spirit of infirmity 18 years, and was bent over, and could in no way rise herself up. But when Jesus saw her, he called her to him, and said to her, Woman, you are loosed from your infirmity. And he laid his hands on her, and immediately she was made straight, and glorified God. But the ruler of the synagogue answered with indignation, because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath. And he said to the crowd, There are 6 days on which men ought to work. Therefore come and be healed on them, and not on the Sabbath day. The Lord then answered him and said, Hypocrite, does not each one of you on the Sabbath loose his ox or donkey from the stall, and lead it away to water it? So ought not this woman, being a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has bound, think of it, for 18 years, be loosed from this bond on the Sabbath? And when he said these things, all his adversaries were put to shame, and all the multitude rejoiced for all the glorious things that were done by him. A spirit of infirmity. We can compare this with Proverbs chapter 17 and verse 22. A heart that is joyful does good as a curer, but a spirit that is stricken makes the bones dry. So what would be the medical diagnosis of the woman with a spirit of infirmity, bent over and could not stand up straight? Arthritis of the spine? Self-inflicted bad posture, maybe? Spirit, the basic meaning of which is to breathe heavily. When the word is used of the wind, as it is on some occasions, it denotes a strong, powerful wind. Similarly, the Spirit of God is said to rush suddenly and powerfully on a man. It is used here in the sense of an overmastering rush of feelings. Spirit represents the mind and art of a person. By art we mean feelings and emotions. But a spirit that is stricken makes the bones dry. Proverbs chapter 17 and verse 22. And behold, there was a woman who had a spirit of infirmity 18 years, and was bent over, and could in no way rise herself up. Psychosomatic.
Here's the definition of psychosomatic: of a physical illness or other condition, caused or aggravated by a mental factor such as internal conflict or stress.
Look, when you get down to it, even mental states are actually only physical states, are they not? I mean, the brain is just a chemical supercomputer. The brain creates chemicals which produce feelings and emotions. Like it or not, emotions share some very real biochemical links with your nervous system, immune system, and digestive system. Consciousness is a property of the brain, and the brain is a biochemical engine, or it's just a chemical supercomputer. Sin originates in the brain flesh, not in the mind. The scriptures recognize the psychosomatic principle, though only in relatively recent times have medical researchers in general become aware that there is some connection between pathological conditions in the body and a person's emotional state. Proverbs chapter 17 and verse 22 states, a heart that is joyful does good as a curer, but a spirit that is stricken makes the bones dry. Such emotions as envy, fear, greed, hate, and selfish ambition are injurious, whereas good emotions have a beneficial effect, produced through cultivating and displaying love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faith, mildness, and self-control, the fruitage of the Spirit. Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23. The Scriptures do not, of course, classify all illnesses as psychosomatic, nor do they rule out as objectionable all consulting of and treatment by physicians. Paul called the faithful Christian Luke the beloved physician. See Colossians chapter 4 and verse 14. The bones are the interior supporting framework of the body, and as such are used in the Bible metaphorically to represent one's being, especially as afflicted by deep feelings and emotions. Thus, the bones of a fearful individual are said to be filled with dread. Job chapter 4 and verse 14. One's bones can shake because of extreme dejection, or be hot from dryness because of disease. Jeremiah chapter 23 and verse 9. Concerning the prophets, my heart is broken within me. All my bones tremble. I am like a drunk man, like a strong man overcome by wine, because of Yahweh and his holy words. Job chapter 30 and verse 30. My skin is black upon me, and my bones are burned with heat. The fear of Yahweh is a refreshment to the bones. Proverbs chapter 3 and verse 8. A good report is said to make the bones fat, or fill them with marrow, that is, invigorate the whole body. Proverbs chapter 15 and verse 30. Pleasant sayings are a healing to the bones. Proverbs chapter 16 and verse 24. On the other hand, negative emotions can have a harmful effect on one's organism. A spirit that is stricken makes the bones dry. Proverbs chapter 17 and verse 22. A wife that acts shamefully is said to be to her husband as rottenness in his bones. Proverbs chapter 12 and verse 4. The harbouring of jealousy towards others can also be destructive to a person physically and spiritually, and so jealousy is rottenness to the bones. Proverbs chapter 14 and verse 30. So with this information, it helps us to understand the spirit of infirmity. The spirit of infirmity is not a demon. Spirit refers to the human mind and heart. Illnesses caused by a bad human spirit, wrong mental attitude. Remember Proverbs chapter 17 and verse 22. A heart that is joyful does good as a curer, but a spirit that is stricken makes the bones dry. Spirit that is stricken makes the bones dry. Compare this as the spirit of infirmity makes the bones dry. Arthritis of the spine caused by the sin in the flesh due to the spirit of man being stricken with bad emotions affecting the nervous system, immune system, and digestive system. Proverbs chapter 18 and verse 14. The spirit of a man will sustain his infirmity, but a wounded spirit who can bear it? 2 Corinthians chapter 7 and verse 10. Godly sorrow brings repentance that leads to salvation and leaves no regret, but worldly sorrow brings death. So now we'll come to look at Satan in the text in verse 16. Jesus speaking says, and ought not this woman, being a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has bound, lo, these 18 years, be loosed from this bond on the Sabbath day? So here we have Satan, not the spirit of infirmity. Satan and the spirit of infirmity are equivalent expressions. What does Satan mean to you? Well, simply Satan means in the Old Testament an adversary. Satan, the personified adversary, the sin in the flesh. This woman was in an adverse situation. She had arthritis. She was doubled over. She couldn't straighten up. So can we see that the spirit of infirmity is synonymous here with the term Satan? She was bound by her infirmity, or we might say she was bound by Satan, and the nature of this Satan was arthritis. She had been doubled over with arthritis, and now she was made straight.